I bought my first house, which is kind of crazy. You would think, who can buy a house when they're 19? So I didn't have any money. Maybe we had paid it down to $10,000, but we sold it for $30,000. Now we had 20 grand to work with. That we steamrolled forward to the next project. We bought a house for 45,000. We remodeled it and sold it for 90, paid off all of our school debts, and went to Europe and traveled for 4 months. It was just like, this is the best job ever. One thing led to another, but I started doing very well with this firm, but I always wanted to work for myself. I didn't like necessarily working for other people. If there's some person I want to meet and they're like super famous or whatever, I don't care. You know, all they can do is say no. They didn't have a plan that would work on the corner lots. So my partner worked a deal out to buy these corner lots at super cheap. I found out that every corner lot you could divide and make it a halfplex. The first thing that we did when we did our next development, my partner Jim and I said, priority number one is to pay those guys back for any money that they lost on the previous job. We couldn't get rid of them. I mean, it wasn't like we were trying to get rid of them, but they were like, you guys have something different going on.
My name is Abel Vis, and I'm a 17-year-old entrepreneur. It's my mission to learn the most essential skills for living a meaningful life. Join me as I talk to successful people to get their take on what those skills are. Well, hey, Mr. Higgins, thank you for jumping on the Starfish podcast. Really excited to get into this topic of essential skills from your perspective, kind of the most essential skills for young people, teens, and young adults who, aren't sure what they want to pursue in college or if they want to go to college and they want to do something alternative, but they just don't know what skills to pursue. So I'm really excited to get your opinion on this. If we could just start off with you giving yourself a quick little intro and just telling the people who you are, a little bit about your background, and then we'll jump into it.
Okay. Sure. Well, I'm an architect, retired architect now. And that was something that I wanted to do since I was a little kid. I took drafting classes in junior high and high school and just fell in love with the idea of building and architecture. And I had a chance to build a cabin when I was a senior in high school with my future father-in-law. And so I did that. I took a week off from school and spring break, and I just fell in love with the idea of you could take plans and actually construct something from those plans. And so I enrolled at the University of Washington as an architecture major, and after my freshman year, my girlfriend and I got married. We were 19, kind of crazy, but we got married at 19. She was my best friend, and we're still married today, so that says something. But also when we were 19, I bought my first house, and which is kind of crazy. You would think, who can buy a house when they're 19? Because I didn't have any money. But the thing was, is Seattle was going through a really tough economic time. And so they had so many foreclosed homes, and the government came in and bought them and offered really good financing. And they would have lotteries every week to draw out and pick a house. And I tried over and over again. And finally, we won and we bought a house. $15,000 was the total price of the house. I mean, it was like so cheap. And it was only about 9 miles from the university campus. And so we lived there and went on through architecture school. And when I was about to graduate, my wife and I decided, well, let's take a year off, was kind of the direction I was going before we went into graduate school. And so I did apply to 2 graduate schools. I applied to Harvard and another school. I think it was either Yale or Berkeley, not thinking I would even get in. And so my senior year of college, I went ahead and designed a house from scratch. I got an independent study. I had the professors help me do all the working drawings. The wood shop built the cabinets. I mean, it was an incredible experience. And then I got a letter saying I was accepted to Harvard. I was like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do now? I've got, this house to build. We've already bought a lot and we're ready to go. So we sold the house we were in, doubled our money on it. And I went like, wow, okay, I like this real estate thing. This is kind of a nice deal. We paid off all our student loans, went and built the house. But we didn't have time to finish the house, but my best friend was my partner on that, and he went ahead and kept working while we went back to Boston and started architecture school for my master's degree there. It was a 3.5 year program. So doing that, though, was incredible experience. And I bought another house there that I could remodel during while I'm going to graduate school. And I took a class my senior, my last year of graduate school that was a joint class between architects, landscape architects, city and regional planners, and the business department. It was actually offered through Harvard MBA program. And what we did is we would do real estate projects together where you would have a business aspect, an architectural aspect, a city and regional planner aspect, and we would all come together to design high rises, to design shopping centers. I mean, you name it. And this just hooked me on real estate development.
And
So
that
when
was, sorry, that was during your time at university getting your master's. That was like a program inside of that.
this at Harvard, you're talking about this real estate development
Yeah,
class?
the real estate and business thing.
Yeah, it was a joint class that the Harvard Business School offered that I found out about. And so, all of us enrolled, a lot of people enrolled in the thing, and they would put you in teams with a architect and a business major and a city and regional planner and a landscape guy. So you would work as a team of four and take on all these case studies. And your professors were people who were actually real estate developers. They were, building high rises in downtown Boston and all this kind of stuff. So it was a real hands-on experience, and it just excited me to no end that I could have this kind of an opportunity. So when I graduated from Harvard, we could live anywhere. We decided we'd go to the West Coast because family was there. So we moved to San Francisco, and I started working in an architectural firm, and one thing led to another, but I started doing very well with this firm. I was designing all kinds of projects, but I always wanted to work for myself. I didn't like necessarily working for other people, and so I kind of said, I want to go out on my own. And doing that in San Francisco is extremely difficult. The competition is so high. So I connected up with an old friend. Actually, I known him since he was two. We were 2 years old. We lived two doors apart from each other, and he kind of went instead of going the college route, he went the construction route. So he kind of worked his way up through the trades, became a warranty supervisor for a large home builder, and we formed a company. And we said, okay, I'll take care of the design, all of the financing, the entitlements, the permits, all that. He'll take care of all the improvements and the construction. And we were together for 37 years, building homes and all kinds of subdivisions. So then I retired, and that's kind of my background.
Wow, that is quite the impressive background.
Well, it's just one thing at a time, building on each other. And there's a lot of great things I learned along the way that maybe we'll touch on today.
Right. Because in my mind, it's like you bought you bought real estate really early in your life. If we could rewind to that first property you bought, where'd you get the 15,000 to buy that first property? Because that is a significant amount of money, even today for someone who's 19 to have, and back then it went a lot farther too.
Well, yeah, you're right, Abel, but I didn't have $15,000. My wife and I worked together all summer long, and we saved up enough for a down payment. A down payment was about, I don't know if it was $3,500. That's all we had to have. But then,
Mm,
because the government had taken these over, they offered unbelievable financing. And like I said, our payments were only 100 a month. We were paying
wow.
more than that in dorms or to rent a house. So it was like, well, this is a no-brainer. I'll go ahead and do this. And so I didn't have to raise all the money, just enough from working through a summer together and saving and living at home and all the kind of things we had to. We were living in her parents' basement, so we didn't have to pay rent to save up for the down payment.
Right, which is a great idea. And then did you pay off that house before you had sold it, or you sold it with the
No,
debt? Okay.
I think we were in it, just under 3 years, and so, I don't know, we didn't pay much down on it, most of it goes to interest, but when we sold it, we had paid it down to $10,000, let's say we still owed $10,000 on it, but we sold it for 30,000.
Mm,
So then, we owed 10, we sold it for 30, we had $20,000 to work with. We started with like 3,500, now we had 20 grand to work with. That we steamrolled forward to the next project, and we just kept doing that all the time. In
right.
Boston, we bought a house for 45,000, we remodeled it and sold it for 90, paid off all of our school debts, and went to Europe and traveled for 4 months. I mean, it was just like, this is the best job ever.
Wow. That's amazing. That sounds like the dream, honestly, is the real
Well, it
estate thing.
was a dream, it still is. We look back at our lives and just go, "This has been what a ride." I'm with my best friend too, we've been married over 50 years,
Right.
and we just still every day we get up and, "What are we gonna do today?" And off we go together.
That's impressive. Man, so with that vast experience of real estate and architecture, and then you wrote a book recently too, which I wanna talk about a little bit, but all the things you've done, you must have learned some insane skills for succeeding because it sounds like you are very, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like you're a very systematic person, that you find a system that works and you do it over and over in different categories and just succeed in whatever you put your hand to. So, if we could kind of go through some of maybe your top 3 most essential skills that you've learned, if you were to give yourself advice when you were younger, now with what you know.
Okay? But I would have to clarify one thing. It sounds like I built a success on success. We had a lot of failures too.
Mm,
But that's the thing about a failure. It's never final unless you let it be. We learn from a failure or something, and so that we could turn around. But I would have to say that the biggest thing for me, number one, I would put is setting goals. I would set goals constantly. There's a thing to it, to setting goals. I didn't just set one goal. I kind of had four categories of goals. One had to do with work, one regarding family, one regarding just my own personal growth, and then one regarding God. I have a very strong faith base. And so I would set these goals, and they kind of became guardrails to help keep me in check. And so if my goal was to, say, earn X amount of dollars this year, then I would have to figure out how many hours do I have to work. And if that's too many hours and now I could no longer, have good family time, something had to give. So it was kind of a matter of working goals back and forth that I set them that were measurable, they were attainable. These weren't wild, crazy goals, but they were taking steps towards where I wanted to end up and be. And so that was probably the biggest thing. And, my family jokes and laughs when I say, "Hey, it's New Year's Eve. We got to set our goals again. Let's get together." They're like, "Oh, Dad, not again." But it's really what kept me focused, moving forward constantly. And I change them, from time to time, but having that was a huge thing. I think another thing, and I don't know if these are in order, but something else that was probably pretty important is I just have an attitude of no regrets. I don't want to get back at any point in my life and say, "Oh, I wish I would have." So I'm willing to take a lot of risks. I'm willing to, if there's some person I want to meet and they're like super famous or whatever, I don't care. All they can do is say no. So it doesn't matter. I'll go up to them. I'll call, try to pester them with phone calls till they take a phone call. I would do things. There was a professor at Harvard that was world renowned, and I had him come over for dinner. And sure enough, it was like, but people would tell me, "You can't do that." Why not? All they can do is say no. So I just wanted to live a life with no regrets and just go for the gold. And yeah, a lot of times people would say no or things would fall apart, but I kind of had a saying that nobody can take away your birthday. No matter how bad everything falls apart, you're still going to have a birthday. Go for it. So what if you fail on certain things? Get back up, try again. So I think that was one. And then another thing I would say is learn to live on a budget. Too many people do not live on a budget, and I think that's really important. Now, a budget's not a straitjacket, it's not something that keeps you from doing, living life or anything. It's not strangling you, but it helps you keep things in perspective and help you reach your goals by focusing and accommodating that. So I think that's probably the main things I would encourage, and just to be a lifelong learner. Something else, you can learn something from every person you talk to. So always be learning, picking up a book, looking into something else. And so I think that was another big thing that I would encourage everybody to do.
Wow. Those are some great things. There's a couple things I'd love to dive into. For one, your second essential skill that you had said was um to not be intimidated by people's status. And if you want to meet somebody, just go for it. Could you give us
Yeah.
like maybe one or two examples of times that that happened other than that one professor also?
Oh, well, yeah, sure. There was one professor that I had when I was at Harvard that was a big time builder developer in Boston. And, I only had, because they would rotate the professors through whatever the specific project was, we would have 2 weeks to work on it with that professor. Then they would go back to their real job building high rises. Well, I was thinking about building a high rise. That was one of my goals, that I wanted to build a high rise. And so I called his office, and he was in Boston. I was in Sacramento. I just called up to say, could I come pick your brain for an afternoon? And I couldn't get through. I could not get through to him. Well, I mean, the guy's super busy and all this kind of stuff. I understand, but I never gave up. I started building relationship with the secretary and say, "Hey, I know Bob's not in today. That's okay. How are you doing?" And start to build a relationship. And pretty soon she was my advocate. And he took my phone call finally. And we had a great discussion. I said, could I come and just pick your brain for a couple hours? I'll fly to Boston. I don't care. And he said, okay, sure. Come on. This guy, when I got there, my partner and I both went. He spent 4 hours with us, answering every question, took us on tours of his projects. They have a private dining room in the 40th floor of some high rise. He took us up there to have lunch with him. And I was just like incredible. And then I laid out my plan of what I was thinking about doing. And he said, don't. This is wrong. Don't do this. Stay with what you're doing residential. The market's changing here commercially. It'll bankrupt you guys if you go for this. And I just like, wow. Now, how valuable was that experience? But if I hadn't pestered him and kept calling him, and my partner did the same thing, he was always calling up somebody who is a big landowner, and you think they won't give you the time of day, and some don't, but some do. And all you need is one or two, and you will continue to learn from them.
Wow, that's really cool. And the fact that he told you not to pursue the high rise and that saved you a lot of money too, like that's actual value. It's a lot of value.
Oh, yeah. It was huge value, and it changed my course career in a lot of ways, because my goal was to build a 20-story high rise, a mid rise in Sacramento would be a high rise, 20
Mhm.
stories by the year 2000. That's what I was focused on doing. And when I met with him, and he said, "No way." I was like, "Okay." So we stopped and we shifted gears, and wow, am I glad we did.
Wow. When it comes to goals, there is a right and wrong way to make goals, correct? And so could you tell us your framework for making um useful goals that help you actually get things done?
Yeah, well, I guess, um, I would almost back up a little bit. This is what I did when I mentored a number of young adults, and I kinda do this. I say, "I want you to think for a moment on, if your life turned out perfect, what would it look like?" And so you kinda have the end in mind. I would have them work through things and say, "Okay, well, yeah, when I'm 65 or 75 or whatever, I want this, I want this, I want this," and then work backwards, reverse engineer it and say, "Okay, if I wanna end up here, what steps do I have to take this year and next year and next year?" Now you can start to set goals. The goals have a purpose to reach an end point, a destination. And then as long as you keep your goals well-rounded, so so you're not, I mean, if you set goals and they're unattainable, you're just gonna get frustrated and stop. But by having the end in mind, you can work backwards, and I think that's really what helps you establish goals that are productive. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's really good. So what I'm hearing is like make the goals more like lifelong goals and then divide that down into individual years rather than just having a narrow approach to making goals for just 1 year. And then at the end of that year, you might fall off of the train you were on because you weren't thinking long term. You weren't thinking until 65, 75, 85, rather than just the year right in front of you. So,
Yeah, yeah.
so you start big and then divide it down small. Could you give us an example of like one specific goal in your life that you did that to?
Well, I would say, I mean, I've kind of mentioned a little bit about some of these different things, but it has to do with financial freedom. Like I had to answer the question, how much is enough? Because I didn't want a company that got so big that it consumed me. So I limited how big my company got. But I also had certain financial goals I wanted to meet so that in retirement, I could pretty much do what I want. So I kind of had to work backward and say, okay, what am I going to do right now that'll let me live a balanced life, but yet accomplish this at the end? Well, by this age, I need to be earning this much, by this age, by this age. And as I went along, then I learned a lot of things and I found other ways to do it. In the book, I think you might have remembered this section on diversification was one of the steps to go through. Well, one of the things we did is when we would build in a subdivision, we would keep 2 houses and we set up a rental company, a management company. So now what we're doing is instead of just selling them and having to pay profit right away, we're holding on to them, allowing these to appreciate over time and become more and more valuable. And then once we retired, we start selling them off. You're in a lower tax bracket, you sell them off, it generates the income. So instead of paying taxes back then, we collected all the rents and all the appreciation, then sold them later, and that helped us accomplish the goal we were looking for at the end, the financial independence.
Mm.
So, it's kind of a process of being flexible, know where you're headed, and then take the little steps along the way until you accomplish it.
And that's another thing I would like to touch on, the little steps, because I like how you had this end goal in mind and you didn't it sounds like what you did was instead of taking the cash out then, you let them appreciate and then you took the cash out later because you had a longer term goal. Um you also started where you were. And that's a big principle that you kind of talk through in your book, which I really liked because that is probably one of the hardest things I've encountered in my own walk of business because so like right now I'm 17, I'm almost 18, and probably since I was 12, I've really wanted to start a business and be financially free and, invent things too. So like what appealed to me most was inventing some sort of product that I could put a patent on and make a lot of money doing business and then be financially free enough to pursue other things that are more artistic and harder to make money on, like music, filmmaking, writing books, different things like that. So the hardest thing I ran into is where do I actually start? Because I made all these ideas for, different businesses I could start, but they were all kind of unattainable, so I never started them. And in your book, you talk about you have to start with what you have and find out what needs you can meet with what you have. So, could you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. I think I understood what you were saying is that one of the biggest challenges is start with what you have. I mean, it doesn't seem like you have much of anything, yet at the same time, you have these goals you want to accomplish along the way. And I totally get that. Um, that is one of the toughest things, but I think what you have to do too is look at what are the steps to get you there. Like if you've got certain ideas you want to explore, who else is doing something similar that you can talk to? And you can ask them, how did you do that? People share way more than you think they're willing to share. And so a lot of the things will start with what you have. It's simply taking inventory of everything, people, the connections you might have, the advice you can get access to, the books you can get access to, and just I pray through it and find out, Lord, what is it that I could possibly do with what you've given me that I could accomplish this goal? And so it's different in every single situation. But even if you took a bigger goal, like you said, you want to make movies. Okay. How? I mean, that's a really big, lofty goal. But are there steps you can take in the meantime? I got an iPhone. I can make movies. I could do a short. I could do a 2-minute video, or I could do whatever it is and make an interesting commercial out of it. I could do whatever, or I can talk to certain people. You're in Texas. I don't know. Yeah, I have friends at USC Film School. If somebody went to them and said, "Hey, talk to me. How did you do this? How can?" And then you start getting, you know a friend who knows a friend. It starts opening up doors, and you can start learning. And next thing you know, you do have something to get started with, or you hear from their story. What did they have? They didn't have anything. No, not true. They had a connection somewhere. Nobody starts without anything and ends up getting anywhere. They all have something that they built upon, and it's just a matter of figuring out what that is, and it's easier said than done, I agree, but you gotta ask the right questions too.
Right? And what you had was back in the day was a financial or a economic situation to where you could buy a house for very cheap. And so you jumped on that, sold it, used the money from that to go to the next biggest step. And then, you went to college, and then you went to a company, and then you started your own architectural firm and real estate also. So
Mhm.
I can see how where you started were with what you had. You said something like, what was the down payment again? Like 3,200 or something?
It was about $3,500, but it was an amount that all we had to do, if both of us worked and sacrificed. I mean, nobody wants to live in the basement of their parents' house, but we did that. That was a sacrifice, especially as a newlywed, and we just saved every dime we could, and that $3,500, we accumulated it to put the down payment down.
Right. So you started with that like very small amount, but then you ended up owning your own architectural business. That's a really cool scaling story. I'm also curious, how did you start your architectural firm? Like, what was the story behind that? What were the physical steps that when you left the company, did you already have all your connections, or how'd you get those connections?
No, I didn't have the connections at all, but what we had was, a couple of things. My partner, Jim, was working for a large home building company, and they, are kind of, I guess we call them cookie cutter, where they just reproduce the same house lot after lot in there. But they didn't have a plan that would work on the corner lots. And they made so much money on the other ones, they really didn't care about the corner lots. So my partner worked a deal out to buy these corner lots at super cheap. Then I went to the county, the government, and I found out that every corner lot you could divide and make it a halfplex, 2 lots. So now we were buying lots at super cheap price, and we were dividing them. So now we had 2 lots out of 1, and we started building that. As soon as we sold off all those that we could get, built and sold them off, we took all the profit from that, and we bought a parcel of land, and I'd learned how to, do what they call a lot split. You could create 4 lots without a very minimum amount of government red tape. We did that. We took the money from that, tried to find more of those. Next thing you know, we were buying acreage and rezoning it, and we were doing it step by step until, we just kept rolling everything back in and getting bigger and bigger and bigger until the point where we said, that's enough. We don't want to get too big because we could lose it all. And we did. This sounds all great, but Abel, there were projects where we lost a lot of money. And, it's almost like, are we going to pull ourselves out of this? So don't walk away from this thinking, oh boy, this is a golden touch guy that goes through, because it wasn't that way for us at all.
Man, so could you go into one of those mistakes that you made?
Yeah, sure. Well, this one wasn't so much a mistake as, well, I guess it was, because it turned out like it was terrible. But I'll tell you, we started using banks. We were getting contacted by banks because they saw our signs up all over the place of projects we were doing. And we went in with a bank that would loan us what were called A and D loans. They were acquisition and development loans. So it allowed you to purchase the property, and it was the money to get it all entitled and to put in the improvements. So you had a finished lot. You went from a raw piece of ground to a finished lot. That was their loan. Then they automatically rolled into a construction loan. So they gave us the money to build the houses on. Well, we had, I think, 3 or 4 projects going where we had all kinds of loans, and we were just in the acquisition development phase. when the bank got taken over. And it wasn't a pleasant takeover. The government came in and shut them down. They called all their loans. So here we were with a huge debt that we owed on 3 different properties, and they wouldn't give us loans to build houses, so we had no way to pay them back. And this was really, really bad. So what we started doing is, my partner and I were just frustrated. We prayed about it. We said, "You know what? We're going to pay this down step by step." It's kind of like how do you eat an elephant, one bite at a time. So we made a little graph out of cardboard that of 1 inch was like $30,000 of debt. This cardboard went all the way up the top of the vaulted ceiling of our office, over the top and back down half the other wall. We had that much debt.
Wow.
And we're like, well, what are we going to do? Declare bankruptcy? No, that's not how we are. So we started selling homes. We started selling lots to other builders we knew. And sometimes we'd even lose $5,000 selling one. But little by little, we would clip off this debt until it went all the way up, all the way back, and we got rid of all the debt. I think we went a year and a half without a salary, either of us, no money whatsoever to get rid of that debt. But by the time that was done, we vowed we would never borrow another penny from a bank. We would go slower and use our own money. So we never paid interest. We didn't worry if something didn't sell because it was just our own money sitting there. And that made us probably twice as much as we ever lost by having that huge debt. So it was a great lesson we learned. That's what I mean by it's not a failure if you learn something from it. So that's just one example of a really tough setback. But I tell you, going through something like that, you learn what your wife is like. I mean, come home and tell her she doesn't get to go out, get to do anything, and I don't know when it's gonna end, but it's at least a year, it ended up being a year and a half. Oh, she was there for "I'm in," she said, "That's okay, I know, we'll get through this," and I mean, I just, now you can kinda get a feel for why I'm not letting that lady go. 50 years. She's just been incredible, and now she's blessed because we stuck it through, and it's just been amazing.
Wow. So you have a couple partnerships going because you got obviously your wife and your family, but then you also had a business partner too. That's a lot of relationships to handle while you're doing, all these risky moves in business. Is that a strain on your relationship on either of those relationships?
No, my partner and I were always we were just so compatible. If one of us was down, the other one was up, so we just kind of would do this stuff, but we always did things together and we never blamed one another. If something went wrong, we didn't point fingers at each other. So he was more like a brother to me. I mean, I'd known him since we were 2. We were like great friends growing up and things. So that was not difficult. Thankfully, my wife stayed out of the business part. She said, I don't even want to know the stuff you're doing. You go for it." And she knew I was prudent, and as long as I was getting home and spending family time and taking us on vacations and stuff, she was good for that. So the relationships kind of took care of themselves because of the goals I had set.
And
Always date my wife and things like that.
um, I'm just wondering, you had a hierarchy of goals, right? Because it sounds like um, you would scratch any goals that were underneath your family if they took out of your family time. So, what was that hierarchy of those 4 goals you had told me before?
Well, I don't know that there was a hierarchy. I wanted them to all work together. If you remember, I said, I wanted you start with the end in mind. And if the end was financial freedom, how can I accomplish that without compromising family time, without making my wife feel like a secondhand citizen? How do you do that? Well, it might mean I have to work less. I have to be home by 5:30. I can't, be a workaholic. I want to spend time with my kids. You have to balance all of that together. And sometimes you have to slow things up. And when there's a setback, like you wanted to, I mean, going a year and a half didn't help me and reach my financial goals initially. But afterwards, I realized, wow, this is an accelerator. And having no bank involved, this is great. So it's not so much prioritizing the goals, they all work in harmony with one another to let you reach the end goal.
And you didn't take loans out of banks. Did you take loans somewhere else, or was that just all your own money?
A couple things we did. Most of it was our own, but not all of it. For example, we had three business partners that we involved with us. One of them was our lumber supplier. He provided all the lumber for our houses, and their business was super successful, and he kind of wanted to be involved in development a little bit. It would be kind of fun for him. Another guy was a friend or accountant recommended who had some money he wanted to invest, and so we had these three guys that combined their money together with us. And this is another one of these stories where the first project we did together was pretty much a bust. I mean, we've still made a little bit of money, but I think they each probably lost, maybe $10,000. It wasn't like anything they had hoped for. But what we did, the first thing that we did when we did our next development, my partner Jim and I said, priority number one is to pay those guys back for any money that they lost on the previous job. We didn't owe them anything. It wasn't a responsibility. They knew what they were getting into. But we said, that's just not how we do business. We are going to pay you guys back. Then we'll move on. And you know what? As soon as we paid them back, we couldn't get rid of them. I mean, it wasn't like we were trying to get rid of them, but they were like, you guys have something different going on. We are here for the long haul. We trust you here. And so we kept using their money, and then it was our own money. And that's, that's kind of the way it went.
Wow. So what I'm hearing here is it's really essential to create those good relationships with people you do business with. Like that sounds like everything to me because then they started coming to you and saying, we don't care that it wasn't a success. We want to just do business with you as a person.
And that's true. And it was the same way with our contractors that we use, our subcontractors, because my partner and I knew that for smaller companies, like say you're a framer or you install cabinets, it's a tough business, and a lot of builders, uh, the big general contractors, would string them out. In other words, they would do the job and they would say they'd pay him in 30 days. We had a policy at our office that if your invoice was in by Wednesday and your work was done, you would be paid on Friday. So we ended up funding a lot of the work for these guys, and they appreciated it so much. They wanted to work for us. So they would come back and give us great prices on what we were building. But also, if there was a problem down the road, a warranty, hey, I got a leak over here on something. Can you come fix it? They were there like that. They took care of us because we took care of them. But we were only taking care of them because it was the right thing to do. And we were tired of watching them be taken advantage of by other people. And we're going to pay them one way or another. Why not pay them early?
Right? Because the longer you have to wait to get paid, the less motivation you have to do it again. Wow. That's some really good advice right there. I'd also love to just ask you if there was something in your life that you regret, like a habit, something that was really wasting your time that you had to cut out of your life to be more successful and also be able to give your family more time. Um, because it sounds like you have a lot of really good habits, but I'm sure there was something that you had to cut out.
The funny thing about that, Abel, is when you have goals that have those kind of guardrails, it's hard to have bad habits because, I mean, for example, I love watching pro football, but I can't sit there and watch game after game after game and still realize that I want to spend quality time with my family. It's the weekend. This is my time with my family. So what I would end up doing is only giving myself the freedom to watch one game. If my 49ers were playing, guys, I got to do that. But other than that, I'm not going to waste time with this. But you see, having that kind of a guardrail, that family time was so important, wouldn't allow me to have the bad habit of doing that. Or, I want to spend time with my kids before they went to bed when they were little. I couldn't watch television. I couldn't just get lost in my own books. I had to spend time with them, and that kept me from having the bad habits. I know it sounds kind of crazy, but these are there for a reason, to be your guardrails and keep you on task.
So what I'm hearing is if you do something you're passionate about, for you, that was your financial goals and your family. And if you're passionate enough about those things, you won't be as tempted to get sidetracked with less valuable things that steal your time.
That's very true. Yeah, and that's the whole thing. I mean, your jobs are not easy. I mean, they're going to be there's going to be moments when they're very, very difficult, when you're going to have to sacrifice. But the thing of it is that if you're passionate about it, and you can read stories about any entrepreneur, it's not all uphill. I mean, not all just simple. There's setbacks. There's times when they are facing huge problems, but passion gets you through it. If you care, it's not even like you have a job. This is just not, I'm not working. I'm doing something I love. Somebody said that if you do something you love, you'll never work a day in your life. And it's true. It's fun. I mean, I loved going to work. I loved all that, but came to a point where I have a lot of other things that I love. And sometimes you have to balance things. I taught at Azusa Pacific, where your mom went to school, for 9 years. And, I mean, I was doing my full-time job in Sacramento. I'd have to get on an airplane, fly down, teach a class for 1 day, and fly back again, and it was like, well, that's a big lot of time out. But one of the reasons I did it is both my kids were going to school there. So now I could fly down, see my kids, and come back. It's like, okay, here's family time. And, my wife would come with me sometimes. And so you have to balance everything out. And I also had an amazing partner who said, I'd rather have you here 4 days a week than try to do it myself without you. And so, he was just a great guy to work with and understood that I had more priorities than just work.
Right. That sounds like an amazing partner. I've heard a lot of horror stories about, business partnerships, and it's interesting to hear your story was so good. Having that partner seemed like it really gave you the freedom to spend more time with your family, and also just go farther in your career and have someone to rely on also. So, would you suggest a partnership in general to get started?
Well, that's a tough one. But for me, it was great because no one has all the skills. So you're either going to have to hire somebody to supplement what you can't do, and maybe you could do it, but you don't have the time to do everything. So a partner is great to have that. But, as scripture talks about, don't be unequally yoked. You know, that is huge. My partner has the same kind of faith relationship that I do, and so that gave us a platform of commonality to build on. Because otherwise, I mean, there was even times where we would give a lot of money out of our company to help organizations that were, supporting Christian needs. Now, if my partner wasn't a believer, and yet I am, you're going to have conflict. It's just not going to work. So you have to have the right partner with the right skill set, but it's always easier to have two people carry the burden unless they become the burden.
Right. That's a big one. You don't want a burdensome partner.
No.
Also, you had mentioned God. You're a Christian like I am, and I'm curious, um, if you could tell our audience, like, what is the connection between having business success and life success and, your faith in God?
I don't really see a big difference in the two. I mean, um, I guess to me, I would always start my day in prayer, asking God for direction and wisdom. And then decisions would be run by Him through prayer. And we'd listen to the Spirit of God say, yeah, this is an open door. And lots of times we were stubborn and we didn't listen and regret that every single time. But I don't see that they're exclusive in any way. It's kind of like my marriage, my wife has the same faith base that I do, and it doesn't raise problems. It solves problems when you have a uh, common faith and listen to the Spirit and direct you and guide you. And I can't say enough about how much that has led to a lot of the success and things. But yeah, I don't know if I answered your question, but I don't see it as an exclusive. I see it as a benefit.
For sure. And speaking of religion, you also wrote a book. It's not necessarily a religious book, but does have those themes running through it. It's a book about how people can start businesses from where they are. So I see we're closing in on our 45 minutes. I think you said you had something at that time. So um, if you want to tell us a little bit about your book too, and like where people can find it, that'd be great.
Oh, sure. The book that I wrote was really for my grandkids. It was, we don't know how long we'll have on this planet. And so my grandkids are 7, 10, and 13. So it's kind of like, well, you know, they're young, but there's a lot of stuff I want to share with them. Just like I'm talking to you, I want to relay that information to them, and nobody knows when the Lord will call them home. So I said, well, one way, why don't I write a book, and I'll put some principles in it that they can discover. And so the book is called Mr. Owl and Little Bird, and it's kind of an adventure story because my grandkids love adventure. They love those kinds of stories. So I started writing an adventure book, but I put all kinds of Christian and just general business principles in it. And a lot of these I learned while I was doing volunteer work in Africa, and just so many principles I observed being lived out over there. The ones you mentioned: start with what you have, start small, start straight away, start to share. All these things come into play, and I wanted my grandkids to learn about that. As far as the book itself, it's available on Amazon. I think you can go to Amazon and look it up, but um, yeah, and then I had application segments at the end because sometimes you can read a fable almost, and you get one set of information from it, but is it practical? Well, I wanted to make the the practical part very obvious, and so there's applications that live out these principles for my grandkids, and so it's kind of demonstrating to them how they could apply at their own age, and these things could work for them. So that was kind of the gist of it.
Man, and that's on Amazon and Barnes and Noble, or where can you find that?
I have it just at my local Barnes& and Noble. That's another one of those things where if you don't ask, you don't get. And like people say, "Oh, you can't go into Barnes& and Noble." "Why not?" I went up and said, "Where's the manager?" And she says, "I'm the manager." And I said, "Well, I wrote this book. I'd like to give this to you, and call me. I'll call you in a week and see what you think." I called her up and I said, "What do you think? Could we bring this book in here and sell it?" And she says, "Sure." Now, I don't know if they've sold any. I'll find out when I go back to see her. But yeah, they took it, and so it's available in our local Barnes& and Noble. It's not in all the Barnes& and Nobles, but you always have to be asking.
That's really cool. Yeah, when I saw the picture of it in Barnes and Noble, I was like, how did that happen? But your book is really good. I've read through it and I really enjoyed the principles. It's made me rethink some of the business ideas I've had because a lot of my business ideas are not starting where I am. Uh Back in the day, well, I mean, I say back in the day, like a year ago, my main business idea was to, start buying real estate, cash, full price, rezoning it, and then selling it again, and eventually work up to where I can rent out different properties to get cash flow. Um, Problem was at that point, I had maybe like $3,000, and the real estate market around here in North Texas is not very cheap at the moment. So I was having a really hard time finding anything at my price point. I actually did find some properties that were like $2,500 full price in Arkansas, but they were not in a very good neighborhood, and it wasn't very good real estate. And it was too far. Like I wasn't going to be able to be hands on enough with it for my limited knowledge at this point about the real estate market. So I was actually like calling a real estate agent in Arkansas, and I was talking with her about the price, and I was like, I don't know, I might just do it for the experience. But then I called a real estate friend of mine, and he kind of talked me out of it. He's like, don't just buy it just to do it. Like, this is a bad valuation. If you could get this for less than half the price they're selling it for and sell it really quickly, you'd make some good money on this. But he gave me some advice. He was like, if you're just trying to buy real estate cash, go straight to owners, and don't work with real estate agents because they're a lot more professional and they're trying to get their clients, a good valuation for the house. Look for someone who wants to get rid of their property. So that kind of made me step back, and I was like, okay, I got to start more where I am. and, get more money and more capital just to get into real estate properly and know what I'm doing, because I know people have lost a lot of money getting stuck with real estate that doesn't have value, and then they're just paying taxes on that. So, um, I stepped back, and some of the businesses I was doing after that were more starting where I was, which is, I was building chick brooders for baby chickens as they grow up. So like these wooden boxes that you could put in your garage. Um, and I was doing video editing because I have experience with that. And so just starting where you are is so important. And I really like the way you emphasize that in the book. And your applications are really good too. They're very inspiring.
Well, thanks, Abel. I have a lot of thoughts for you. I don't know if this is the time to share them or you want to do it on a phone call separately or whatever, but
Yeah, I
with
would
real
love to
estate,
right now if you have just another 5 minutes or so.
absolutely. Yeah. I'll just start with that. You don't have to necessarily have money to buy real estate. You will at some point, but you one of the things that we did is we canvassed any area we wanted to build in. We went by and we looked for anywhere that had the acreage that we wanted, the size acreage, and we wrote a letter and we mailed it to them. And we said, if you are ever interested in selling your property, please let us know. We are super interested. Well, 90% of them, nobody ever responds to. But I was in my office one day and an older gentleman walked in and he had this piece of paper and he slapped it down on our conference table and he said, I'm ready now. I'm like, what are you talking about? Well, and he flipped it over and he showed me this was a letter we had sent out 10 years ago to the guy offering to buy his property. And time wasn't right, but he had saved that. He brought it in and set it down. Now, in 10 years, we had definitely saved up a lot of money to buy this property, so we went ahead and did it. But it was just simply by sending out a letter. Another one we had, a woman had passed away, and in her nightstand, her son was going through her stuff and pulled out, and here was one of our offers with a business card, and he called us up. We ended up buying her property. We hadn't done anything, even thought about them for years, and you just never know. And then there was one other one. A guy had a great piece of property that he didn't want to sell. I said, ask him why, because he was probably close to 70 at the time, and he said, well, I don't want to ever move again. Well, there's something called a life estate where we worked a deal out with him, and we said, okay, I think the purchase price of this property back then was maybe 200,000. And we said, we'll give you $20,000 a year for 10 years. At the end of 10 years, we own the property, but you can continue to live there as long as you're alive. And he's like, okay. So every year they get $20,000 that they could go and enjoy. They'd go on a little trip, they'd do whatever. And sure enough, after 10 years, I think his wife passed away, but he was still alive. And he lived there another 2 or 3 years before he finally moved into an assisted living or something like that. But by the end, we owned the property free and clear. We didn't owe anything on it. And, it was kind of like, wow, this is incredible. And we bought it at prices 10 years earlier. Like when
Mm.
I think we ended up selling it. I don't even think we built on it. We probably sold it for double what we paid for it. But it was simply the fact that, I didn't have to pay any interest. It was all 20,000 every year for 10 years. So it went up in value every single year for 10 years until at the end, that's really worth a lot. And he got what he wanted out of it. We definitely got what we wanted out of it. And it was very manageable. So there's lots of ways of thinking creatively outside the box about real estate. And there's a lot of books written. You just got to go out and there used to be a guy that wrote something called Nothing Down or something like that. There's all kinds of books and things like that. You just have to be careful of the leverage and some other things, but there's lots you can do even at your age.
And for me, would you suggest I get a loan, or would you suggest I try to buy it outright or owner finance?
Well, it depends on how long you're going to own it. It depends if you can afford the payments on it. I mean, there's a lot of variables in there, but putting all your money that you've saved up in one spot is a little bit harder. I learned the lesson. You familiar with the term leverage?
Yeah, but if you could explain that a little bit, just what you mean by that?
Well, I'll give you an example. When I was in college, I had saved up, I think, about $1,200, and I was talking to my father-in-law. You know, he taught me a lot about real estate, but he told me, he said, you know what, they're building some condos in Hawaii. And he said, I think that you should go in because I'm going to buy some. And I think you should too, because they're going to go up in value. He knew the people who were building them or something like that. And I'd never even been to Hawaii, but I said, okay, you know, I've got $1,250 and that was just enough to buy one unit. Okay. I paid all cash. That was my unit. He said, well, watch what I'm going to do. And so he bought 10 units and he put like $125 down on each unit. Then he went ahead and rented them out, and I rented mine out too. And we went through, and I think after about 4 or 5 years, we sold them. Well, both of them sold at like a couple $1,000s, 2,000 maybe, whatever. So for me, I made $750. I was very happy. He made the 750 also times 10 units. So he made, you know, like whatever that is,
Is that 7,500?
$7,500. We both invested the same amount, but because he bought 10 units and I bought one unit, I didn't have any debt. He had debt, but he taught me what leverage was. And that was the only reason he did it. Now, leverage is a two-edged sword, so you can get in a lot of trouble if you own 10 homes and can't afford it. But to me, the answer is you got to be careful with your cash because cash is very limited. There's a lot of cheap money out there that I would consider doing, and people who sell it sell the property. Sometimes we ask them to carry a note back. You know, you provide the financing. You know, we'll come in and give you how much money do you need? 75,000. Okay, we'll give you 75,000 down. You carry the rest of it for 5 years, and then we'll pay you off. They don't care. They're getting payments every month. They've got the money they want. You just have to match circumstances with what you have available and find a match, and then you can step forward.
Right. So what I'm hearing here, if I put all my money into real estate, that's not probably the best idea because then I am doing the opposite of diversification. I'm like putting all my eggs in one basket. And as a novice real estate human, I might make mistakes. So using a loan for leverage, taking on that debt, I will have less risk and greater reward unless I can't pay back the loan or the bank screws me over like they did to you that one time. But it's just kind of that balance.
Yeah, well, I mean, you have to be able to afford the monthly payments. You know, there's a lot of different things involved in that question, but cash is a commodity. It's a very valuable commodity. So I would be very careful, guard it carefully, and dole it out only when you know you can get it back. Because the thing about real estate, it is not a liquid asset. It's not like a stock that you can just call up and say, "Hey, sell this. I need the cash back in a week." Real estate does not work that way. If you need your money back quickly, you're going to have to discount it considerably to get the money out. So, you know, you kind of have to evaluate all of those different factors in there. But be patient. That's the other thing is you have to remember is that this life journey, it's more of a marathon than a sprint. You don't have to do everything right now, but even the steps you've taken, look how much you've learned already. You're building on a knowledge base. And the more people you talk to and ask questions, like that real estate agent you talk to, you're learning more and more and more all the time. So you don't have to buy something immediately. Just continue to raise your capital, continue to learn, continue to ask questions, pray for wisdom about what you want to do and where you want to go, and start setting those goals and thinking through life.
That's really good advice. I think I'm definitely learning that because the reason I wanted to do it all cash back in the day was that I was 16. Well, yeah, I believe I was 16. So I didn't have the ability to take out a loan from the bank. My only option would have been to take out a loan from actual people, which made me kind of nervous because I was, again, a novice. And I didn't want to just have to work the next 5 to 7 years just paying people back. So that's why I was trying to do it that way. I really felt like God was mandating me to, or telling me I should buy the land that year. But then at the end of the year, no properties. And I felt like I was being too eager with it. I felt like I was being impatient, but I still feel like God wants me to buy real estate. I just feel like it wasn't that year because now, knowing what I know and having raised more money, I understand more about the valuation. And, now that I have more actual cash, I do feel that where I don't want to put that all into real estate because that would be so centralized. So, I'm a lot more open to a loan now than I was back then because of all I know.
Yeah. Well, you're going to find out that you got to be very careful with banks too. But
Mm,
and even borrowing from relatives or friends, I think someone said the definition of a distant relative is a relative you've loaned money to. It usually ends up causing a rift and you separate apart. So I'd be real careful about borrowing money from family members, but sometimes it's the best source. You just have to play it by ear. And there's a saying about banks. You've maybe heard this one, but a banker is a guy who will loan you an umbrella and then ask for it back when it starts to rain. And that's kind of the way it goes sometimes. They're more than willing to give you money, but as soon as things turn sideways, give it back, give it back. I want my money back. And so again, you got to be very careful, especially as you accumulate more and more assets, because they will tie the loan to all your assets, not just the amount of money you borrowed. At your age, you don't have a lot of assets, so it's going to be hard to get a loan, but it doesn't mean it's not possible. You just have to keep after it.
right. And if I did lose everything, it wouldn't be that much because I don't have much to lose.
Yeah, and you'll learn a lesson from it. See, it won't be a failure. When I was graduated from high school, I took my graduation money and I bought stock. Now, I didn't know
Mm,
anything about buying stock, but I bought stock in a local company because I'd seen their boats. It was called Uniflight. It was an incredible boat. They made these most wonderful things. That very year, they had an oil embargo in the United States I mean, there were lines for gasoline, and pleasure boats went so far down the tank that this company declared bankruptcy. And so I learned a lesson. I spent all my graduation money, but I go, well, what the heck? Okay. I'm not going to invest in things I don't understand.
right. That's a
Cheap left.
good thing. It reminds me of when I first did stocks too. I had like the exact same thing. I I think I bought a Disney stock, or rather a Disney share, and I was like, they're definitely going to go up drastically in value because at that point they were just about to open Marvel Land, I believe in California, and I was like, oh, dude, when they open Marvel Land, it's going to go so much higher because people are going to love that. Me and my friend were super excited. Um, but then they also started tanking with their movies, and also COVID happened and just different things, and it didn't turn out to be the spike I thought it was going to be.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you for giving us an hour of your time. I really appreciate that. This was a great conversation. I think this will really help the younger generation. Um, so yeah, just thank you for being on the podcast. If there's any last words of
All
advice
right.
or if that's all.
Last words of advice. Well, I guess I would just leave you with thinking about use your time wisely. You asked about how do you waste time, and I know a lot of people are into the video games and all that kind of stuff, and there's easy ways to get distracted. But somebody said one time that time is like a coin, like money, like a coin. You can spend it any way you want, but you can only spend it once. And it's the same way with time. If you're going to waste your time playing a video game, yeah, uh, go ahead, but that time is gone. You'll never get it back. But that doesn't mean you can't play video games. Remember, there's parameters on it. Just limit how much time. This is recreation. That's part of your personal goals. I want to be refreshed, and playing video games refreshes me. Great, go for it. But those guardrails have to be in place so that time is the most precious thing you've got. So use it wisely and look at the long game, not the short game. The long picture, and set your goals, and you'll get there. Don't worry about it. You'll make it.
Wow, that's amazing. Well, apply this to my audience out there. Apply this wisdom. Use your time wisely. And also buy Mr. Owl and Little Bird. It's a great book. All right. Thanks,
All
Ron.
right.
I appreciate it. You have a good day.
You betcha. Well, take care.
You too. All right. Bye.
Bye.